Hey, y'all.
Hey, Tasha.
Hey, Tammy.
How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you for bringing me cookies.
You're welcome. I thought I was going to get turned around if I didn't bring some this time.
I can't wait to try them.
Got you some good ones this week.
I know. They look delicious. So you're going to be telling me a story.
I am.
Anything new? What are you drinking?
I am drinking craptastic wine. It's Sutter Home Sauvignon Blanc, just because I forgot to buy anything.
Do you call it craptastic, or is it named craptastic?
That's what I call it.
Okay.
It's just cheap wine.
I'm drinking Crown.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to drink whiskey with you anymore. I've been banned from that.
Okay. Understood. Hello to Brian. Okay, girl, tell me a story.
So I am going to give some warnings before we start this story. This is an 1800s English story. So pinning down names, dates, places, some of it is a little hard to do.
Right.
As you're doing the research. I know the story itself is all correct. But if y'all find a contradictory date or name, please don't at me.
It's possible.
I have some spots in here where I'm like, okay, this part, the research is sketchy.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you to the best of my ability.
Yeah.
Also, we're going to go into a bit of history first.
Okay.
So we're going to go back to history class. Everybody ready? You got your braces and retainers?
I got it. I'm ready.
All right.
I was never good in history, but I'll try to pay attention to your lesson.
So the reason we're going to need to go through this historical part is because we need to see how society impacted the crimes. Because, and you'll see as we go on, that society as a whole at that time, morality was different than today. For one thing, if you were anything other than heterosexual, you were shunned.
Yeah.
Unwed mothers
definitely
were shunned. You had no rights.
Yeah.
And as a woman, you had no rights, and then those rights were taken even further if you were considered immoral. So where we're going to start, y'all are going to have to bear with me. I'm going to stumble over my tongue all day. We're going to start with the Poor Law Amendment Act of 1834.
Is this in the United States?
No, this is United Kingdom. This is a UK case.
Gotcha.
It's also known as the New Poor Laws and was passed by Parliament in 1834. Right. That's why the name is there. With this law, lawmakers were attempting to reduce the amount society was paying to support the poor.
Okay.
There was an overwhelming number of supporters who felt that the poor were living on social assistance who were able-bodied and simply using the system to support a lazy lifestyle. Like we've never actually seen that before.
Right, exactly.
They went as far as to create terms to describe each group of poor. A pauper was a poor person due to physical or mental defect.
All right.
Whether it was advanced age, too young to work, they were a pauper.
Okay.
They were poor for things beyond their control. If you had cancer and you couldn't work, you were a pauper. You weren't the bad poor.
Okay.
And then poor were able-bodied people who just didn't get out and work. Now, this was all based on public perception. So someone who had fibromyalgia, had a pain disease that you couldn't see, they were considered lazy and bad poor.
Right.
And would receive no help. They didn't take into account that some people just physically couldn't do that kind of work, whether it was what they called a weak constitution.
Yeah.
Or, like I said, mental health. And the jobs that were out there, if you weren't a skilled words are hard. Skilled laborer didn't pay very well. The wages were horrible. Under the Poor Act, all social assistance, including monetary, food, or medical, would only be offered through what they called a workhouse. The goal of the workhouses was essentially to shame and make the poor so uncomfortable they would stand on their own feet and no longer be poor.
Oh.
Yeah, you see how well this is going to work, right?
Right.
The workhouse further segregated people once they went in. So you had men in one dorm, women in another dorm, and children in another. So we're going to look at this in a little bit different way, in that if, say, a husband, wife, and their children came in, they were considered good poor. They were able-bodied, working poor, but they had fallen on hard times. Say the husband got sick, and that's why they're there. So husband can get medical care, wife and kids have food, a roof over their head, and he doesn't have to stress. He can just rest in the medical wing, get the medical care, and then they can leave.
Gotcha.
In the dorms were, again, subdivided. There was good poor, bad poor in the dorms. The good poor maybe got a little bit of extra food. They got, your paupers.
Yeah.
They got choice bedding. They got stuff like that. Their dorm wasn't as overcrowded as the bad poor. When you get to the bad poor wing, it was overrun with lice.
I was going to say.
Vermin.
Yeah.
I saw one picture that I'll post on Facebook when this comes out. They were literally sleeping in what looked like trays, shoulder to shoulder.
Wow.
Like you could not roll over level of overcrowding. So of course, disease and everything's going to run rampant in this. So if you're a widow that comes in with their children, you're going to the good poor. If you're a unmarried young woman who can't make her way, you're going to the good poor because you are morally sound, and they are solely making this judgment on their decision.
Yeah.
Has nothing to do with you.
Right.
The good poor dorm was, like I said, a little cleaner, a little easier, a little better. But you know who didn't get in the good poor dorm? Unwed mothers.
Yeah.
They couldn't go in there. And when you went in the workhouse, first thing you did when you came in, it was like going into jail. You went in, they got all your information. They made you strip down. They searched you head to toe. And I mean a full cavity search. Then made you de-louse in a shower that typically did not have hot water. Gave you workhouse clothes and sent you on to your dorm. Just a little side note, and I found this, I'm only throwing this in there because I found it interesting. Part of the POOR Act said that in some way you had to pay your way. So if you were alive, you worked 12 to 15 hours a day doing backbreaking work, and that's how you paid your way. What if you died in the poorhouse?
I don't know. I mean, it seems to me like a lot of people would die in the poorhouse.
A lot did. So if your family had enough money to claim your body and pay for burial, they could. If they couldn't, the poorhouse made money on you by selling you to medical students as a cadaver.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Nearly a third of all workhouse residents were over the age of 65 and were simply there because they were too old to do a job that would allow them to earn enough money to support themselves.
Yeah.
And towards the end of the workhouses in the early 19th century, when they started to close them down, they realized that the only people in them at that point were the very young, very old, and the infirm.
Yeah.
So they changed to more of a modern healthcare system and things like that, closer to what they have now.
Yeah.
Without the stigma of the workhouses. So that's
good.
Thankfully has ended.
Yeah.
But at the time our story is taking place, it is literally in full swing.
Yeah.
So why am I talking so much about workhouses? One of the main reasons that young women would admit themselves into the workhouse was because of the stigma associated with having an illegitimate child. Most women who became pregnant were shunned by their families.
Yep.
Society in general wouldn't have anything to do with them. No matter if they were taken by a smooth-talking man who promised to marry them, raped, incest, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
You were meant to keep yourself pure.
Yeah.
This is where, so off the POOR Act came a bunch of acts of parliament where they tried to refine this. One of the things they came out with was the Bastardry Act, which is as wonderful as it sounds.
The unwed mothers and their bastard children.
Yep. And this essentially said that if a woman got pregnant outside of marriage, she would receive no assistance.
Wow.
Nothing. Before this, the government would track down the man, make him help pay for the child's care, essentially pay child support.
Yeah.
Plus, the woman would receive assistance from the state, medical care, food, things like that. With the new act, it was argued that penalizing the fathers of illegitimate children reinforced pressure for the parents of children conceived out of wedlock to marry. And then the man was more likely to commit the sin of adultery. So it was better to not force him to marry the woman he had impregnated, that the woman should have just kept her knees closed.
Wow.
You know, that whole aspirin birth control.
Yeah.
Hold aspirin between your knees.
Yeah.
It was my grandmother's idea of birth control. Was aspirin. The effect ended up being more akin to promoting bastardry and promoting poor behavior among women
rather than discouraging it.
The men now had no consequences.
Right.
Like, you weren't prosecuted for rape. You weren't prosecuted for any of that. In fact, another little interesting side note, do you know when spousal rape became illegal in the United States?
I would say 70s.
1991.
Really?
You could rape your spouse up until 1991. There was no legal ramification for this. Because it's sad. A woman's duty.
Yeah.
Fuck that.
Yeah.
Fuck you. Fuck that. Fuck the horse you rode in on.
That's right.
Because if I say no, the answer is no. And I'm sorry, I'm not a pepper spray kind of girl. Please try me. No, but seriously, any way they got pregnant, an abortion was illegal.
Right.
You couldn't do anything. So to make it clear, the government no longer would help find the father. He was no longer responsible in any way for the care of the child and had no obligation to the mother. The government also would no longer help unless the woman was willing to go into the workhouse or poorhouse. The government felt that it was the woman's responsibility to not act in immoral ways, having sex before marriage.
Yeah.
And so required that the mother be able to support herself and her child all on her own. This may have been doable. Like, in today's society, it's doable.
Yeah.
A woman can get a decent job and support her family.
Well, a woman has rights today.
Yeah.
Didn't then.
They didn't. And so a respectable woman could get a job as a housemaid, a laundress,
right?
You know, a wet nurse. They could care for children, be a governess, any of these. But that required education. So many people at that time didn't have an education. They couldn't do it. The women that didn't have an education were barmaids, prostitutes, maybe a housemaid. Maybe if you were well-spoken and carried yourself well, you could land a prime position as a housemaid.
Right.
But what if the man of the house took a fancy to you, raped you, and got you pregnant? You were fucked. Mm-hmm. So for the lucky few that were able to either hide that they had a child or find a compassionate person that would take the child, they were able to work. But there wasn't childcare. There wasn't daycare.
Right.
You're barely making enough money for food and housing, let alone childcare. So what do you do?
Yeah.
These women would go in the workhouse. A lot of times they would end up either killing the child themselves or trying to have the child adopted out. There was an epidemic of finding dead babies on the sidewalk at this time.
I did an episode called Baby Farming, and it was related to this exact same thing.
So you just hit the nail on the head. We're covering baby farming today, but we're covering the most prolific baby farmer that was ever found.
Who was it?
Amelia Dyer.
We did that one.
You did Amelia Dyer?
Yes.
Oh my goodness. So I tried to dig, but the fact that we don't tell each other what we're covering beforehand.
I know.
Sometimes makes it harder.
No, that's cool. I was like, I'm following you with this whole story because I did the research. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So you get why the history is so freaking important on this one. Many women of the day would try to get rid of the baby. They would try back alley abortions, which most of the time were not effective. They didn't actually
wound up
kill
hurting the
baby.
mother.
It would kill the mother more
Yeah.
often than it ended the pregnancy. And a lot of these women ended up abandoning the baby, killing it themselves. And on top of that, infant mortality rates were horrendous at that time.
Yeah.
1 out of every 3 children would die before their first birthday.
Yep.
Whether it was disease, accident,
Yeah.
neglect. And with so much pressure on these women, they started to look for other options. Orphanages and children's homes started... Sorry, y'all.
Got the
I have
hiccups.
started popping up all over England. The problem was they would not take illegitimate children.
I know. That's the
They
crazy
would turn
part.
them away.
Yeah.
Like, these are the mothers that truly needed the help. Orphans, we'll take them.
Yeah.
You know, dad died, mom can't make it, has to turn the kids over to orphanage, we'll take them.
Right.
But the illegitimate,
No.
no.
And those are the ones that needed it the most.
Because apparently they are not worthy at birth because they inherited their parents' sin,
Right.
which is bullshit.
Yeah.
This finally brings us to the meat of the story for today.
Alrighty.
No, you were wondering why I was giving you all this history lesson. Well, here's your trigger warning. It's only going to get worse from here. We are going to talk about child murder. So anyone who is sensitive to that, this may not be your episode. Love y'all. See y'all back on the next one.
Yeah.
Next time I come, I won't talk about killing babies by the dozens, I promise. With the rising number of illegitimate babies, some enterprising women saw that they could make a little extra money to help these poor mothers. This gave rise to a practice known as baby farming.
Yeah.
Taking inspiration from the wet nurses of the rich, these women would do, there was 3 different ways baby farming worked. One, you could pay week by week for childcare where you dropped your child off while you went to work in a factory and brought him home with you every night.
Right.
That is the precursor of our modern childcare. Then there was long-term or respite care is what we would consider it now, especially I know certain hospitals and stuff do respite care. If you have a special needs child,
Yeah.
you can check them in for the weekend. They will take care of them so you can take a break and be a better caretaker in the long run. And that's kind of what these baby farmers did. They would take the child for a monthly fee and the mom came and got them on the weekends or for holidays and things like that. The last one would have been more of an adoptive type situation where they paid a one-time fee, turned the child over, and never saw the child again.
Right.
This actually became the most prevalent form of baby farming because no matter what, these women had had an illegitimate child.
Yeah.
They couldn't come back in a year and pick up a 1-year-old and have a plausible story as to where this baby came from that now made it respectable. This was still a bastard child.
Right.
So, and the farmers were ranged from truly good people trying to do a good thing to the worst scum of the earth.
Yep.
And the one we're going to talk to today, it fed off the worst scum of the earth.
Yes.
Like she was worse.
She was terrible.
The farmers would place an ad in the local paper, something like, respectable couple cannot have children of their own and longs for the love of a child. Clean, safe home in the country. Adoption, £10. The mother would then respond in writing and plans were made for the adopter to meet in public, a place like a train station, something like that.
Yeah.
And the mother would hand over her child. Anything she had for the child, a lot of these adopters would request clothing, food, things like that to get the baby started.
Sure.
On top of
The
more
tip.
money than most of these women could make in a year. Like how these women even could afford this is a miracle. And the presumption being that the baby farmer would care for the child until they came of age or the mother came back to get them.
Yeah.
And would be the farmer's responsibility. But there's good and bad in every profession. And when you make a living by taking in children, sometimes caring for the children is just too expensive.
Yeah.
One such farmer took this to an extreme. Amelia Dyer.
Yes, indeed.
She was born with a certain level of actual class. She was born in 1837, the year the Poor Act was. I just realized that. Like, that just clicked in my head. Her father was a cobbler or shoemaker. He was very respected, made a decent income. And Amelia grew up with a certain level of privilege. She always had food on the table. She went to a good school. She had shoes. She had shoes. Most of the kids didn't have shoes. They didn't have good clothes. They didn't have jackets. And she had all these privileges. She had a loving home. Her mother was a wonderful person, took care of her and her siblings. She's one of 5. Had an older sister named Sarah. Her mother's name is Sarah. Her brothers are listed as brothers, but they never give names in anything. When Amelia was 4, her older sister Sarah passed away. And then her mother gave birth to another little girl and named her Sarah.
Okay.
So mom and both sisters are all named Sarah. She's the only other one in there. So then baby Sarah passes away.
Oh my gosh.
And then mom gets sick.
Yeah.
Mom has typhus.
Yes.
Is Amelia who you covered?
Yes, it's exactly who I
God.
covered. Yeah.
You guys.
Yeah. That's
I feel
okay.
bad now.
We did this on, who else was it that you and I did the same?
Daniel Blank.
Yes,
we did
Daniel
the same
Blank.
one on Daniel Blank.
Yep.
I had to call Woody. Actually, I called Jim. And I was like, Jim, if Woody's going to cover Daniel Blank, he at least has to get my relative's last name right. Because he was saying Millet. And the whole time I'm yelling at the screen. I'm yelling at the radio. It's not Millet. You're from here. You know better.
That's right.
Yeah, he messaged me. He's like, oops. Okay. So in 1848, Amelia's mother actually passes away of typhus.
Yep.
This was super traumatic for Amelia because she was her mother's primary caregiver. And before her mother passed away, she descended into complete lunacy.
Yes.
Absolutely knucking futs.
Yes.
And this had a big impact on Amelia. When you're taking care of a mentally ill person, like, that's hard.
Yeah.
I mean, I've helped taking care of my grandmother when she had Alzheimer's, and that was tough because she thought I was my mom.
She was also taking care of her mom as a child. You know, she's not a grown.
Yeah, she's like 7, 8.
Yeah. So she's witnessing some pretty horrific stuff at a young age.
Yeah.
Not that that's an excuse, but.
Yeah, but you can kind of see it twisted her moral code.
Yes.
She was allowed to stay after her mother passed away in a really rare form in that time. She was allowed to stay at home with her father until she was 14 when she finished school. And then she moved to Bristol with an aunt and trained to be a corset maker. There's not a lot of information on her during this time frame.
Yeah.
It's kind of gray area.
Yeah.
1859, we know her father dies. She's estranged from her brothers after her father dies. She really never goes back home again that we know of.
Yeah.
But if her dad's dead and she's estranged from her brothers, home is wherever she is.
Right.
At the age of 24, Amelia moved into a boarding house where she met George Thomas. Thomas was actually a man of decent means and had a trade making him a desirable match. A text message popped up and like blanked out my screen and I lost my spot. Problem was, remember I said Amelia's 24?
Yeah.
Mr. Thomas here?
Yeah.
He old enough to be her grandpa.
Right.
He's 59.
Didn't they like lie about their ages they could get married?
They did. And there was a 35-year age gap. And when they decided to marry and went to the court, he shaved 11 years off his age. And Amelia said she was 30 and added 6 to hers. And they nearly cut that age difference in half. And everyone was fine with this. Well, things were going great for Amelia at first. You know, she's got a happy marriage. Yeah. And by all accounts, it was a happy marriage. She was very aware, though, that even if George left her money, it wasn't going to be enough for her to live out her life. She wasn't going to be a well-to-do widow at that point. And she needed a way to support herself once old George kicked the bucket of old age. So she started training as a nurse.
Right.
Nursing then was not what nursing today is.
Nope.
This was Nurse Hatchet.
Yep.
Like, it was doubtful she even had any medical training in the process.
And no bedside manner.
No, they were actually trained not to have bedside manner.
Exactly.
They were trained to be very stern and strict with their patients, that patients needed structure and that you didn't show compassion or care, that wasn't good for them.
Exactly.
They mostly learned how to clean the ward and light the oil heaters and stuff like that.
Change bedpans and...
Yeah, change sheets, give people bed baths. And I'm sure they were not gentle. This was not the bed bath every man has a daydream of.
No.
So she started training as a nurse, and she felt that this was a good fit. After caring for her mother, she had some experience with this, and she went with it. She made a decent living and met some people that would help her out along the way, including a midwife and nurse named Ellen Dane.
Yep.
Ellen told her all about an easier way to make money with her nursing degree. And that was to run a laying-in house.
Yep.
So Ellen would take in women. They'd live with her until they had their baby. And then either they would take the baby and go on about their business, or Ellen offered some additional services. She would either baby farm, care for the baby, or she would help find your child a good adoptive family.
Right.
But again, good adoptive families pay for these children.
Yes.
So she would double dip. She'd get paid by the mama to take the child, and then she'd get paid by the adopters to adopt the child. When the child was with her too long, though, they're cutting into her profits.
Yes.
Ellen would not kill the children outright, from what I read.
Right.
She let them starve to death.
Yes.
She would dose them, and she knew the real money, that real money was in the turnover. How fast can I get this child in my house and out of my house? Whatever condition that child left in, there was no care for the child. And a lot of the children were not unadoptable.
Yeah.
Respectable families did not want to adopt a bastard.
Right.
Because morality was inherited. If your parents were immoral, then why would I adopt an immoral child?
Right.
Amelia was intrigued, but she kind of tucked this away for later. She didn't feel that at this time, she's making a good living. Thomas is making a good living. It's just the two of them. They're living more than comfortable.
Yeah.
They probably even maybe had a house servant of their own at this point. So she tucks the knowledge away. Well, in 1864, Amelia finds herself pregnant. And as was with the times, when she began to show, she had to quit working.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm sorry. I worked with Kale. I was a paramedic, and I worked until I physically couldn't reach the stretcher past my belly. Because it looked like I swallowed a beach ball. And then with Gavin, the only reason I didn't work is by that point I had 3 kids at home and 1 on the way. And my husband was a teacher, and it's like, well, someone's got to be here to raise all these children.
Right.
So at that point I was baby farming on my own. Just mine are all still alive. They're all doing well now.
You did a fine baby farming job.
A little baby farming job I told them at one point, they were all ticking me off. I threatened to plant them in the background with just their heads sticking up. I was like, I can feed you, I can water you, but I don't have to clean up after you at this point. So Amelia just kind of tucked the information away till money got tight. Sorry, y'all. I lost my train of thought. So 1869, George passed away.
Yeah, she had a baby.
She had a baby. She had Ellen. And now, whether Ellen's named after Ellen Dane, we don't know.
Okay.
But she had baby Ellen. And then in 1869, George dies essentially of old age. Right. He was just an old man.
Yeah.
And Amelia starts kind of looking around. She needs to support her and Ellen, right? So she sets up her own business. First of all, she can't have all these pregnant women in her laying-in house with a 5-year-old running around.
Right.
So what's she going to do with her baby?
I know.
She farms her baby out.
Got rid of her own.
Got rid of her own. But apparently she sent Ellen to a good baby farming situation because at the age of 14, Ellen came back to live with her mother.
Okay.
So we do know Ellen lived through this horrendous experience, whatever it was. She started out with a laying-in house, and the women would come. They would live with her until they gave birth.
Right.
And at that point, she still had her contact with Ellen Dane. So she would pass the children off to Ellen's contacts in London and Liverpool, where they would take their cut of the profit and farm the baby out again or adopt the child out. At this point, it is believed many of these children did find adoptive families in the early days. She also advertised for adoptions and childcare. She would feed the babies as little as possible, keeping them quiet with the help of a medication.
I know.
A medication.
A medication that she took herself.
Yes. Known as Mother's Friend.
Yes.
Or Godfrey's Cordial. It consisted of opium, water, and something called treacle. I tried to look this up. I couldn't get any great answers, but it was apparently something similar to like paint thinner.
Well, I'm not surprised.
It was said to treat everything from colic to diarrhea, which are totally cured by the same medication today. Totally cure colic and diarrhea with one syrup that's given to children and keeps them quiet.
That's right.
Really, what it did was drug the children into submission and keep them quiet while she let them slowly starve to death.
Yes.
She would give them cow's milk, water, dry bread, whatever she had that was appropriate for them to swallow at the age they were at.
Yeah.
In all actuality, she just drugged them into being quiet.
Yeah, that's exactly what she did.
Many baby farmers use this product to keep the kids quiet while they slowly starve to death. And if they accidentally gave the baby too much, so what? More money in their pocket, accidental death. I have to insert this somewhere because I couldn't find a good spot. Amelia gets remarried in 1972 to William Dyer.
1972?
1872.
Okay.
I put 19. Total typo, guys. 1872.
To William Dyer. And that's when she became Amelia Dyer. Yeah.
Yes, that's when she became Amelia Dyer. They had 2 children of their own. It was a rocky relationship. He was in and out of the house. He was more out than in. Did he know about the events of this story? Yes. Yes, he had to know how his wife was making money. Why do I think he was more out than in? I don't think he agreed with it, but I think when he became broke and destitute, instead of going into poorhouse, he went to Amelia.
It was a job.
He went home. When a child would inevitably die, Amelia would call the coroner, recording the death as illness or accident. The coroner would collect a fee for his services and the burial. For the services and burial, and take the child's body away. But when in 1879, the coroner's spidey senses got a little hinky, when 4 kids died in 2 weeks in Amelia's care, she was brought up on charges. They tried everything they could to get her on murder. There just wasn't evidence. There just wasn't anything they could pin her on for murder, so they got her on neglect. She spent 6 months in a workhouse.
Yeah.
In prison at hard labor.
Right.
Our at hard labor, they're like stamping license plates. They're at hard labor, they were breaking rocks.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's the hard labor that would keep people out of jail. We maybe need to bring back some rock breaking.
Maybe so.
Like, we could all have gravel driveways. I'd pay for the penal system to break up some rocks for my driveway. In prisons, again, 1800s, no joke. It was really, really hard work. So when Amelia came out, she decided she didn't want to do this again.
Yeah.
She wanted nothing to do with going back to jail.
I'm not getting caught.
Yeah. And she started showing signs while she was in prison of mental illness. Whether it was...
Probably all that paint thinner she was drinking.
Yeah. I mean, because she was drinking... She was taking the laudanum right along with giving it to children, guys. So... Yeah, there's no telling. Does mental health run in her family? There's a lot of speculation.
Yeah.
You almost have to be some level of crazy to do this bullshit.
Yeah.
To pull this.
Definitely.
Yeah. Amelia couldn't take it. She wasn't going back. Knew she wasn't going back. She tried to commit suicide multiple times while in prison. And she decided it just wasn't in the right place for her. So after her release, she tried some things a little differently. She went back to an honest living, working as a nurse in an asylum. But this was hard work too. And didn't bring the quick money of baby farming.
No.
So back to baby farming she went. She made some changes. First, no coroners.
Yeah.
They were just nosy busybodies that had their fingers in her money. Second, she needed to move a lot.
Yep.
Keep people from getting suspicious. So she put her plan in action and rented a house. Placed an ad in the paper, and soon women were coming to her with their babies. Which brings us to the third part of the plan. The longer these babies lived, the less profit she made.
Yep.
She decided instead of letting the children waste away, she would either drug the babies to death with mother's friend, or she would smother them by putting her hand over their mouths.
Yep.
And watching them fight. There are some people that speculate she actually enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Because she would hold the children as she suffocated them.
And we're back.
Sorry, guys.
We had to take a little break.
We did. When you leave the children running the show, sometimes they need to call the boss and find out what to do.
No problem. Okay. Amelia Dyer.
Yes. At some point, smothering them wasn't doing it for her anymore. Maybe she lost a taste for it. There's no telling. But she started strangling the babies with seamstress tape.
Yep.
Which is like a bifold fabric. She would tie it around their necks and tie a knot right under their left ear, just like the hangman's noose.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was horrible. And she also started medicating herself, like you said, with laudanum and alcohol. I don't think she could handle what she was actually doing.
Yeah.
And around this point, she started checking herself in and out of mental facilities. No one can say for sure if she was truly mentally ill or if she just knew how to play her cards right from working in a mental facility.
That's what I think.
But it sure seemed like every time the police or anyone got suspicious, she took off to the mental facility.
Yep.
In 1893, she checked herself into the Wells mental facility for the last time. No one knows why. No one knows if she actually just never had another mental break or if this one was so bad, she decided this was not something she wanted to repeat.
Right.
But she's quoted as saying that this visit was most disagreeable. So apparently all the others were agreeable.
Well, I don't know. She's just a Looney Tune.
So I found multiple conflicting stories about when Amelia went in the workhouse, but she did at some point go into a workhouse.
Okay.
And she came out with a helper. She talked a sweet little old lady, 70-year-old lady, who had resigned herself into, I'm 70, I'm a widow, I can't make a living.
Yeah.
I'm going to live the rest of my days in the workhouse. It just is what it is.
You're right.
At least I've got food, I've got a roof, I've got clothes. Okay, is what it is. Granny Smith is what she went by.
Isn't
That's
it
Granny
Smith?
Smith.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And Amelia asked Granny Smith to call her mama. Well, the whole reason was if all these women are bringing their babies to her, then what's better than mama taking care of the elderly Granny Smith and the baby? And this is just a loving home for this child.
Right.
So it was all a front. It was all for show. But Granny Smith didn't know that. I 100% believe Granny Smith was an innocent bystander that was taken advantage of in this case.
I agree too.
They used her, or she used her for the appearance. Granny Smith never planned on killing any children. And Granny Smith said she never actually witnessed any children being killed. That she would be there when they accepted the child. They'd bring the baby home. She might care for the baby for a night.
Right.
And then the baby would leave the home.
Yep.
She didn't know that they never actually left the home.
She said sometime they were gone so fast she didn't even know their names.
Yeah. Yeah, they would come in, go out. Like,
Yep.
she thought Amelia just had lined up adopters
That
because
quick.
sometimes it was literally in the same day.
Yeah.
Like, the baby would show up, she'd care for her for a little while, and then Amelia would leave with the baby and never come, and the baby wouldn't come back, and Amelia would just come back with a brown paper package.
Yep.
We've been talking a lot in generalities.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some actual cases that we know that Amelia committed. As with all killers, Amelia got sloppy and slipped up. The first case we're going to talk about is Helena Fry. Helena was the daughter of Mary Fry, a governess who conceived a child with a member of the household she worked for. There's some conflicting reports whether it was the father or the son or whatever. It was an affluent man, and she was a governess. And whether it was consensual or perceived consensual, because what right did she have to say no to a man
Right.
at that point? Either way, she got pregnant.
Yeah.
She went to Amelia's, stayed there for about 4 months. When the baby was born, she turned the baby over to Amelia as a caregiver. She did not want her child adopted out. She had every intention of coming back, and come back she did about 3 months later.
Yep.
Amelia puts a baby in her hands, and this baby's huge. It's like a 6-month-old. And Mary is a governess. She knows about children. And so she starts arguing, and Amelia says, this is not my baby.
Right.
This ain't my child.
Right.
And Amelia just insists, this is your child, this is your child, this is your child. So Mary starts stripping the baby because her child has a distinctive birthmark. This child does not have it.
Right.
So Amelia pushes Mary out the front door, tells her to leave. You're no longer welcome here. Mary's tenacious. Like, this bitch did not fucking stop.
That's right.
She harassed Amelia.
She got the popo and everything.
Yeah, she got the popo involved. Amelia went in the asylum again to get away from her. And then old Mr. Dyer, he moves back in with his 2 kids. Amelia actually moved out. She's living at a boarding house around the corner. And when Mary shows up, Mr. Dyer goes, well, Mary died. Mary can't give you anything because she's dead.
Amelia.
Yeah, Amelia. Sorry. Amelia died. She's dead. She can't tell you where this baby is. Then they find Amelia, and she tells Mary, well, the baby was adopted out, and gives her sketchy details.
Yeah.
So they chase that down. Like, this woman was like a dog with a bone. And I'm sorry. I'd have been the same way.
Yeah.
Like, you paid someone to take care of your child, and you go back and the child's not there.
Right.
She harassed Amelia right up until the end, up until she was caught. And in fact, she's one of the ones that Amelia was prosecuted for because she had made reports and she was documented. No one else was.
Yeah.
Next, we have Doris Mormon. Doris was a child of 25-year-old Evelina Mormon, a poor barmaid. Doris was born January of 1896 in a boarding house in Cheltenham. I'm sure I butchered that. Any English listeners we have, I'm sorry. Please don't at me. Words are hard. Evelina was faced with an impossible choice. She is a poor barmaid. She can barely make enough money to feed and house herself, let alone a child. And it's not like she can take a child to work in a bar.
Right.
Like, I'm sure at that time it wasn't illegal, but it was probably frowned upon.
I'm sure it was.
And on top of that, like, women with children, they didn't work. They couldn't work.
Right. They're not supposed to work.
She posts an ad in the newspaper looking for someone to adopt her child. No one ever writes her back. But just under her ad, she sees married couple with no family would love to adopt healthy child. Nice country home, terms 10 pence. She replied to Amelia's ad to one of Amelia's aliases. Did I say Amelia used aliases?
No, but
she did.
She did.
She used Thomas. She used Dyer.
Yeah.
She used whatever hit her fancy at that time.
Yeah, exactly.
And Miss Thomas wrote back that she should love a baby girl that I could bring up and call my own. We're plain homely people in fairly good circumstances. I don't want a child for money's sake, but for company and home comfort. Myself and my husband are dearly fond of children. I have no children of my own. A child with me would have a good, loving home and a mother's love. Evelina had to have thought she won the fucking lottery.
Right.
Like, your child's going to a healthy home with a loving parent.
Yeah.
And she...
This is exactly what she wanted for her child.
Yes, but she did not want to give her child up for adoption. She loved Doris more than anything on this earth and did not want to actually give her child up. So she argued with Amelia at first to do a weekly manageable payment and be able to come visit her child whenever she wanted. Amelia argued for full adoption. No, I want a child that is mine.
Yes.
A week later, Evelina, carrying her daughter, a box of baby clothes, and 10 pence, met Miss Thomas at the Cheltenham train station, where she handed over the baby and the money and the clothes and everything else.
Yeah.
She couldn't bear to part with her child yet, so she actually rode the train with Amelia to the next stop.
Wow.
Before she got off and went back to her apartment. Miss Thomas was supposed to be going back to Reading, which is where she was from. She did not, however. She went to London.
Because she's not Miss Thomas.
Because she's not Miss Thomas. She went to her daughter's house in London. She arrived with a wiggling, crying baby, went to the back room to feed the baby, came back and laid the sleeping baby on the couch while she went out to run an errand. Her daughter's husband, so her son-in-law, says that the baby slept the whole time she was out. When Amelia returned, she had a 13-month-old named Henry, and she collected the infant sleeping on the couch and left to get on a train to Reading. Week later, our wonderful Evelina, our poor heartbroken Evelina, receives a letter from Miss Thomas saying how well Doris is doing and how loved she is and how ecstatic they are to just have this wonderful baby girl be part of their family. Evelina wrote back but never received a reply. Let's face it. Doris died in that apartment in London. She wasn't sleeping on the couch.
Yeah.
So we're going to jump a little bit now to the Thames River.
Okay.
The Thames River was a major thoroughfare for them, much like the Mississippi River is for us.
Yep.
Barges and boats went up and down all the time carrying goods. So in 1896, when a bargeman found a brown paper package floating in the river, he didn't question it. Found goods were something that happened all the time. He picked up the package and was excited to unwrap the bundle and see what prize he had found. It had to be a really bad surprise when he unwrapped it and it was a dead infant.
Terrible.
Yeah. So he pulls over to the side of the river and immediately calls for the constable. The constable comes and takes the baby, brings him to the coroner, an autopsy is performed. The cause of death was immediately evident. There was no question. There was a white piece of seamstress tape tied around the baby's neck in a knot under its left ear. Strangulation. The chief constable, which I have to tell y'all, I found their names and I was like, okay, so I'm gonna add this. We've got George Tousley.
Okay.
And Constable Anderson.
All right.
And they're on the job. Constable Anderson's on the case. They, after the autopsy is done, they take the brown paper the baby was wrapped in and they lay it out to dry. And this is where I say Amelia got sloppy. Because on that brown paper was the address and name, Miss Thomas. They went to the address. She no longer lived there. But after some good old gumshoe detective work, they went to the post office where this package was stamped. And they gave them the address of Miss Thomas, who now went by Miss Dyer. they didn't want to just go in. Like, they didn't have enough evidence.
Right.
They found a dead baby. It's wrapped in paper. Who says someone didn't just pick this up out of the trash and wrap the baby? So they find an ad in the newspaper from a Miss Thomas. And the police matron, who was most likely one of the detective's wives, writes to Miss Thomas looking for someone to adopt her child. She writes back and forth and even meets with Miss Thomas one time. So they make arrangements for the baby's adoption. Miss Thomas had been wildly surprised when she opened that door and was two detectives standing on her front porch. They arrested her on the spot and searched her home. In the home, they found letters addressed to mothers, letters about babies, lots of babies' clothes, lots of pawn tickets. Because remember, she would ask for those clothes for the babies, and then that was how she made more money. She went and pawned the baby clothes.
Exactly.
Because that was apparently a big thing at the time.
Right, exactly.
Was to pawn baby clothes. I'm like,
not today.
My kids destroyed freaking clothes. I mean, Kale outgrew stuff faster than he could destroy it, but Gavin was right behind him. And, well, he didn't grow as fast. And then we always just passed him down to another family member or whatever, you know? I think my sister got some of Kale and Gavin's unisex baby onesies for her little girl when she had Colette. So one of the weird things they found a cabinet. It smelled strongly of cleaner. And then they found a wooden chest, so like a armoire chest in Amelia's room that smelled of death and decay. And I'm sorry, as someone who has smelled that, you never forget that smell.
Yeah.
Just like I can smell a house fire and tell you if there's nobody in it or if there's someone in it. People weirdly smell like cooking pork. Like weirdly smell like pork.
All right.
Just for y'all's information
okay.
there. While they're searching Amelia's house, they also drug the river. And they find 6 to 7 additional bodies of young children and infants. Remember when I told y'all Amelia showed up at her daughter-in-law's house?
Yeah.
Her daughter and son-in-law's carrying a carpet bag?
Yeah.
With an infant and then picked up a 13-month-old boy? One of the things they found in the river was a carpet bag containing an infant and a 13-month-old boy.
Oh my gosh.
They pieced it together, and God, these were some amazing detectives. They pieced it together, and they put together that Evelina's letters were dated about the right time for the infant in the carpet bag.
Right.
That Doris would have been about the right age. So Evelina, who loved her child so much, the next time she saw her child was when she looked at her dead body and confirmed her identity. So the only murder Amelia was ever truly convicted of was the murder of Doris Mormon.
Gotcha.
Amelia she pled guilty.
Yeah.
There was a trial, and a lot of places, a lot of podcasts and stuff call it a trial. I'm going to say it was more along the lines of a penalty phase that we would have in today's trials than a true trial. If she pled guilty, why would they have a trial?
Right.
Also, her daughter and son-in-law were charged.
Wow.
With infanticide. Amelia wrote a letter while in jail. And this is the letter. I have the actual letter.
Okay.
I have a picture of it to share with our wonderful, wonderful listeners. Sir, will you kindly grant me the favor of presenting this to the magistrate on Saturday the 18th? Insistent I have made, and her spelling and grammar are horrendous. So if parts of this don't make sense, y'all don't blame me.
Yeah.
She was educated, uneducated. Instant I have made this statement out, for I may not have the opportunity when I must relieve my mind. I do know, and I feel my days are numbered on this earth, but I do feel it is an awful thing drawing innocent people into trouble. I do know I shall have to answer before my Maker in heaven for the awful crimes I have committed. God Almighty is my judge in heaven and on earth. neither my daughter, Marianne Palmer, nor her husband, Alfred Ernest Palmer, I do most solemnly declare, neither of them had anything to do with it. They never knew I completed such wicked things until it was too late. I am speaking the truth and nothing but the truth. As I hope to be forgiven, I myself, I alone must stand before my Maker in heaven to give an answer for it all. I witnessed with my hands. Amelia Dyer, April 16th, 1896.
Well, it's good that she did that.
It is. You know, though she pled guilty, she did plead for her family's exoneration. She was ultimately sentenced to death on the eve of her execution because her daughter's trial was set to start 1 week after hers. They delayed the trial while they reviewed additional documentation and evidence. On the eve of Amelia's execution, she received word that both her daughter and son-in-law had been pardoned.
Good.
That they were found not guilty.
Good.
When the executioner came into Amelia's room the night before while they were preparing her, they asked her if she had anything she wanted to say. And she says, well, I've filled 8 exercise books with my confession. What more do you want? And I did some research on what an exercise book is. Similar to a
notebook.
Our notebooks.
Yeah.
Well, closer to like the composition notebooks that kids use in school.
Yeah.
She filled 8 of those. When they stood her up on the gallows on Wednesday, the 10th of June in 1896, they asked if she had anything to say. She said, I've said it all.
There you go.
And they hung her at 9 a.m. She was pronounced dead at 9 a.m., 3 weeks after her trial. There were no appeals. They were waiting to see if someone changed their mind. They were like...
That's a speedy trial.
Yeah.
And execution.
So we do not truly have any confirmation on how many babies she killed.
Right.
Historians speculate 200 to 400, but more lean closer to the 400 number.
Yeah.
It is horrible. So in preparation for this, I watched a documentary on Amazon Prime called In the Workhouse. And I have a quote from that documentary I think really sums up what happened.
Tell me.
From Inside the Workhouse on YouTube, it's an amazing story, but it's also a testimony to a whole time period and a whole group of people who are not taken care of and have never been taken care of.
Right.
We have never really dealt with our poor from generation to generation. These situations teach you that the only way is this sense of our responsibility to one another. That is the only way. If we don't have the sense of responsibility for one another, our world is chaos.
Yeah.
And I submit to y'all that the mothers are as much of victims as the babies. And that's why I wanted to cover the history at the beginning.
If the moms wouldn't have been put in the position they were put in, the babies wouldn't have been killed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Society victimized these mothers, which caused the mothers to then victimize the children.
Yeah.
So that is my terrible story that you guys apparently have heard before.
Terrible story.
I don't want to laugh about it, but
no,
it is. And I really do feel like society they tried to make laws to regulate morality, and you can't regulate morality.
Yeah. So we will have something funny, though. I'm going to tell you some funny laws still in the books in different states. How about that?
Awesome. Let's go with that.
We're on Nevada right now.
Will we make it to Mississippi today? Because I'm sure they have.
We already passed Mississippi. We're on Nevada. We're going in alphabetical order.
Alphabetical order.
Okay.
I am a college-educated human being.
In Las Vegas, it's against the law to pawn your dentures. So I guess if you're desperate for money, don't pawn your dentures. In Nevada, it's illegal to drive a camel on the highway. Is it actually called driving a camel? I would think it would be.
I would think it'd be riding.
Riding.
I mean, you could drive a camel if they're hooked to a wagon.
Yeah. Okay. They only have 3 for Nevada. The last one in Elko, Nevada, everyone walking the streets is required to wear a mask. And I know this was pre-COVID when this website created this list. So I'm not really sure why everyone would have to wear a mask.
I don't know. I swear to God, like, I'm not wearing a mask. If you tell me I have to be quarantined with COVID for a week and wear a mask for a week, I'm just quarantining for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because I'm never putting a mask back on.
Oh, the mask was terrible. Okay, I'm going to tell you about New Hampshire, since there was only 3 for Nevada. If a person is caught raking the beaches, picking up litter, hauling away trash, building a bench for the park, or many other kind things without a permit, he or she may be fined $150 for maintaining the national forest without a permit. Yeah. Even if you're doing good, you're not allowed to maintain.
Well, I mean, I could see if you were just randomly building a bench in a national park.
Nope. The
That's
same
a nope.
thing. Picking up litter.
Trash.
Yep. Nope. Okay. New Hampshire law forbids you to tap your feet, nod your head, or in any way keep time to the music in a tavern, restaurant, or cafe. I
wouldn't get prosecuted for that one.
I mean, you're supposed to sit there and listen to music and not in any way react to it. No keeping time to the music. Okay, and finally, this will be our last crazy law in New Hampshire. You may not run machinery on Sundays. Don't know.
So, I do have a picture of Amelia if y'all would like to see
it. Yeah. Hold it up to the camera in front of you.
I'm going to scoot my mic out so I don't take out
Bless her heart.
Doesn't she look like such a sweet old lady?
She looks like she's got resting bitch face.
She looks evil.
Yeah, she does look evil.
Yeah, she looks as evil. Like, I don't see how any woman walked up to this person and thought, sweet, loving mother.
Right. So I
She
want to
looks
leave.
like a child killer.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm going to leave a dog I didn't like with her.
Thank you. That's right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
For doing
and next
that
time
story.
I'll have a story you've never heard before. No, y'all, I have been doing a deep dive on a story. It has been about 3 months worth of work on it. And that one will be a 2-parter because it is at like 15 pages right now for my story.
We'll definitely
But
do it.
I decided because there were some gaps to go back and read this other book. And we'll see. Right now I'm sleeping more than I'm awake. So
no pressure. No pressure.
We'll get it. I'll have it ready next time.
That was a good story. And y'all don't forget to go follow our Facebook page, join our private group on Facebook, the Grits Groups, the Family, Friends, and Fans, the Effers.
Have you heard about the crime cruise in November?
I haven't heard about the crime cruise.
You and I'll have to talk about it, but I am booked on the crime cruise going out of Miami next November.
That sounds awesome.
It is Crime Con on a cruise ship.
Oh.
And it's going to be a lot of fun. Single women, come on. There's a whole group of us.
Awesome.
I've got a bunch of my friends going, and
that sounds
we're
like
going to have a blast.
Awesome.
So I'm actually... Tammy and I need to talk about it because I need some grits merch to wear while I'm at while I'm on Podcast Row.
Yes, indeed. I'll give you some koozies to hand out too.
Absolutely.
Okay, so y'all help us out by going and giving us a review on Spotify and Apple. Anything else I'm forgetting?
I think you got it covered.
Go to Patreon if you'd like to support the show, patreon.com/grits. And we love y'all. Tell your mom and them to listen. And we're going to let Zydeco Mike take us out.